Genocide is a term created during the Holocaust and declared an international crime in the 1948 United Nations Convention. The convention defines genocide as any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. The question of God's role in such violence has sparked questions for many. If God is good, how could such evil be allowed? The following is a conversation on that topic.
When an individual feels that part of themselves being threatened, whether they're actually being threatened or not, when someone senses that this aspect of them is, that the very core of who what they are is being challenged, and not just challenged, but is being diminished or denigrated or offended or discarded or abused, the response can be very passionate, and it can be very powerful, and it can be very violent. And so what begins to happen is that people, feeling this sort of attack against themselves, push back. And that pushback can take on many forms. Now, this is in no way is it condoning genocide or violence. Because the ironic thing, of course, is that in so many cases, religions preach against violence. And yet, in the name of that religion, people have engaged in violence.
Abshir Aden, a sophomore at Sacred Heart University, was born amidst the Somalian conflict. This is his family's story.
While my mother was giving birth to me, just killing people off, she couldn't go to the hospital, so she had me in my grandfather's living room while they were shooting at the house. So she was going through the whole laboring process while they were shooting at us. So that's how I came to this world. People who blame religion, they usually try to blame God in a way. But the way I see it is that God is outside of religion. Religion is more of what was given by us, and then it's our decision to do whatever we want to do with it. If someone does something bad, you can't really just blame God and blame the institution of it, you know. I feel like we should just blame that certain person who's taking God's word and making it horrible.
Whether to stay connected to God, especially if you've had a deep faith or not, sometimes depends on the severity of the situation. And oddly enough, what I've found isn't necessarily true that the most traumatic, horrible things happening necessarily mean a rejection of God. And a case I can give you, and it's not of my own life, but it's a case that probably people know about, but I'll just use it anyway. So there's the great Holocaust survivor and activist and philanthropist and thinker and writer Elie Wiesel. He wrote Night and several other books. And he also wrote a play based on his experiences at Auschwitz, and the play was called The Trial of God. And Elie Wiesel said that he wrote this because he had this experience at Auschwitz where that one day some rabbis and some learned men, they gathered together, and it's in the middle of the Holocaust, at the worst camp possible, just horrific horror, horrific anguish. And these men decided that they were going to put God on trial. And they set it up in a way that, would have been quite appropriate. They had a defense attorney, they had a prosecutor, they had the jury, and then everyone spoke their case. And what was interesting was that at the end of this, Elie Wiesel writes about this. At the end of the day, he says, the trial ended, God was found guilty, and then the men turned around, put on their yarmulkes, and went to pray.
It is hard to come up with an excuse for such violence in this world, but to blame God is to give those that committed the crimes an excuse and scapegoat. And for that, God can't be guilty.